Thursday, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode number 239 of Shut Up and Grind with your host, yours truly, Robert B. Foster. So if you're new to the show, we are all about overcoming obstacles, defying odds, turning trauma into power, and how to tell your story. So if that sounds like something that interests you, I encourage you to hang around. If you don't think it interests you, I think you're lying to yourself and you should hang around anyway, so we have a chance to prove you wrong. And if you're joining me over on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, share the video, because the topic that we're sharing today is very, very important. And I've had other guests on the show that have dealt with this same level of trauma/abuse. And my guest today is going to dive into her story of what she went through, but more importantly, how she was able to navigate through everything, the what happened, the how to pick up the pieces, the how to move forward, the how to tell her story. So this is going to be a power-packed episode. And if you're joining me over on Facebook, please like and share, because again, there's lots of people out there that need to hear this. Just in the intro, I'm sweating. Look at this. What a hot mess. So anyway, again, if you're new to this is episode 239, and it's all about my guest journey. And I've had guests from 6 different continents. We're heard in 44 different countries. And this is something I just started because COVID shut my gym down. And now we're impacting people all over the world 2 years later. So if you're tuning in, thank you. I appreciate you. And let's dive into this topic. So helping me is Coach Rachel Grant. And we're going to talk about her story and get into the main topic. So Rachel, how you doing?
I'm good, Robert. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and listening.
See, and thank you for coming back. So I was supposed to see Rachel last week, but I had some technical difficulties on my end and we just couldn't get it going. So fortunately, she didn't get frustrated and run away, because some people do that. Like, you have issues and they're just like, I'm done. I'm like, okay. Like, mistakes happen in life.
Right.
But where are you joining me from?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. I want to tell a very quick story about San Francisco. So my son in 2019 qualified for the track and field nationals. They were in Sacramento. So now I'm a single parent of 5 kids. So I do everything on a budget. So it was cheaper to fly into San Francisco and then drive to Sacramento. Like, it was like hundreds of dollars difference between, for myself and my son. And so coming back now, it was 106 degrees in Sacramento, 106. As we're getting into San Francisco, we start seeing people with coats, with scarves, you know what I'm saying? Their pants. Now, my son and I, we're in a tank top, shorts, and sandals. This was in July. We get to San Francisco, it's 51 degrees. There was a 55-degree swing from Sacramento to San Francisco.
It's exactly right. It's exactly that. Yes. Yeah. There's a famous quote, sometimes attributed to Mark Twain, though it's suspect whether it was truly him or not. My coldest summer was in July in San Francisco.
Exactly.
It's very true. It's very true.
Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I was like, my son and I, we stopped off at this mall so we could eat. We're walking through. We're the only ones just dying. It's like, do we not scream tourist?
Yeah, they don't. It is true. We know when I've been in San Francisco for 10 years. So I definitely consider it home in many ways. And yeah, we definitely, when we're walking down the street, we're like, oh yeah, they're from out of town. They didn't layer. They didn't know. You gotta bring the layers.
Oh man. All right. So let's dive into the topic at hand, because again, I've had multiple guests on the show, discussing this topic. So just dive into your story, the parts of your story you want to share.
Thank you, Robert. I always appreciate, any platform where I get to tell this particular story. And so we'll begin when I was little, about 5 years old, growing up in Oklahoma. So I am a country girl at heart. And my grandfather came to live with our family, which I was super excited about, actually. It was kind of like a captive audience. He really paid a lot of attention to me. And I really loved just sitting with him on the front porch porch swing and talking and playing and watching shows together and all the typical things that, a granddaughter and grandfather would do. And then one day when I was 10 years old, we were sitting out on the front porch swing and he began grabbing my breast. And I didn't really understand what was happening. I thought, oh, he just doesn't realize like where his hand is. Let me just kind of wiggle and move and, adjust myself. Uh, but he actually gripped a hold of me and wouldn't let me move. And so I, of course, was very frightened, confused. Hadn't really had any sort of introduction to sexuality at that point. This was in the 80s, so there wasn't a lot of body consciousness awareness, consent, your body is your body kind of conversation happening in my home or in my school. All I knew is that I just felt unsafe. But I also felt like this was a trusted adult and someone who I loved. And so maybe I shouldn't be feeling uncomfortable. Maybe this is actually something that's okay. Or so just a whirlwind of confusing thoughts and feelings, all of a sudden. And, I eventually did kind of break away. And I remember very clearly, jumping up and running to my parents' bedroom. Actually, there was this little space between their bed and their wall. And I just got in there, kind of hunkered down, curled up really small. And just so very immediately, one of the things we're going to talk about today, of course, is how trauma impacts our mindset. And it happens just like that. I'm immediately thinking thoughts, I must be bad. I did something wrong. I'm going to get in trouble. I must deserve that, right? I must be dirty or gross. Like just these immediate, like for a 10-year-old, like where do those thoughts come from? But they're just so quick to be on the scene. And the abuse continued for some time and continued to escalate until one day my mom just happened to walk by and she caught him. And she came blazing out onto the front porch and just, immediately snatched me away from him. And she and my father moved him out of the house. Within a day, he was gone.
Yeah.
And I only had a few interactions with him again before he passed away. And I'm very thankful for that. I've been working with people who've experienced childhood sexual trauma for 15 years now. And so I hear too many stories of people who were not believed, who were not protected, even when a parent or a trusted person found out what was happening or understood what was happening, didn't do anything about it. So I have to just give mad props and love, to my parents for, cheers and celebrations to them because, they did that. But what's also true is they just didn't know where to go from there, right? Like they tried to get me into therapy, but I was like, oh no, I am not. Are you crazy? I'm not talking about this. I'm, let alone a 10-year-old sitting down with a male therapist, like, no. And I pretty much just kind of put my head in the sand. Like, I'm fine. Everything's good. Let's just forget about it. But of course we know that doesn't really work. And so my life was continuing to unfold and I was continuing to be impacted by this trauma. And I really struggled in my teen years with self-worth and confidence and, my sexuality and trusting other people and lots of anger. Ooh, child, I was angry, right? But I couldn't talk about what I was angry about. So it was everything but, right? And eventually, if we fast forward, in my late teens, I went off to college and I met a boy and we started to date. And I just realized very quickly that this trauma was still very much impacting me. And in many ways that person helped me to kind of see that and maybe just really name it, like finally acknowledge it and own it. Like, yeah, there's a problem here. We've got to do something. So I started therapy and I started the process of just acknowledging what had happened and kind of getting a sense of, oh, these are the reasons why I struggle with the things that I struggle with. Unfortunately, that relationship began as it evolved, became abusive. And so I was in this very strange world of trying to heal childhood trauma while experiencing physical and verbal, emotional abuse in the present day. And so it was just this mess.
Let me jump in real quick because you unpacked a whole lot there.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned that you recognize that there's a problem.
Mhm.
Just walk me through that. How you
Mm.
came to that realization, because I feel a lot of people with trauma, and now I help people tell stories of trauma.
Yeah.
So I've helped people deal with suicide, watching someone close to them commit suicide,
Mhm.
people dealing with abuse and home invasion, things of that nature. And a lot of it is just recognizing that I'm not okay.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
so how did you navigate that?
Well, I think one of the first clues was when I started dating this person, he had really good boundaries, and I did not. And it was confusing. I was like, "What are you doing? Why are you saying no? Why aren't we immediate?" And it that made me just start to question, like, "Oh, like people do things differently. They don't just immediately dive like all the way in, or there's such a thing as pacing yourself in a relationship. Okay, that's new." And then just the ways that I would be reactive, like my insecurities, because my internal dialogue was so much around I'm worthless, I'm only good for so much and nothing more, like I'm an object to be used. These are all narratives that I identified later. I didn't have conscious awareness that those were necessarily the things that I was thinking, but they were there. And so I would have these real eruptions, what I eventually now in my work will describe as disproportional responses, right? Like, oh, I don't get a text message. And then rather than being able to like take a moment to say, oh, maybe he lost his phone, or, maybe he's just running late, or like, let me just wait and see what he has to say about what happened, or even asking, like, hey, I didn't get a response from you on this. I would just immediately spiral. Like nobody loves me, he's cheating on me, right? Just that the big emotions.
Yes.
And seeing that in juxtaposition, at least in the early days with him, of his kind of very reasoned, calm, proportional responses to things, just it was like it couldn't be ignored any longer. That my way of kind of walking through the world and responding and relating to myself and to others was not working.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you also mentioned you did nothing wrong. And so now I'm in the process of writing a book. Again, it's about overcoming trauma. And chapter one is titled "You Did Nothing Wrong."
Mm.
So in your teachings and your speaking and in your training, how do you help convince people that they did nothing wrong? Because just like you shared with all of the negative self-talk,
Mm.
that plays a role. But the key word in that to me is self, right? It's
Mhm.
negative self-talk. So how do
Yeah.
you help? Well, how did you help yourself navigate through that, and how do you now help others navigate that?
Well, I think it really began at the moment when I left that relationship, when that relationship ended, and I had to take a really clear, honest look at my life. And I just became really clear that if I didn't like get my shit together very quickly, I was going to end up pretty much just surviving my life.
Yes.
I wasn't really living, I wasn't really thriving. And so that really is what propelled me to go and do my master's in counseling psychology. And I began to study the neuroscience of trauma and read everything that I could and kind of use myself as a guinea pig. And so, the very first piece of the puzzle really is all about healing the nervous system, because we can't get kind of into any of the trauma or touch upon even these questions or these feelings of like, is it my fault? Am I the one to blame? And try to start to get perspective on an experience until we can actually step up and look at the experience. And when we are traumatized and the nervous system is injured, our capacity to do that, we just have a very small window of tolerance. So I first really started working with the brain and how do I retrain the brain? How do I heal the nervous system? And, there are various layers and processes and steps to that. And then in sitting with the feeling of, being to blame and I did something that caused, right? There are kind of three main beliefs that people have. Like this, it's my fault because, and then they'll look at something they did or they didn't do. I went out onto the porch. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't say no. And then there are qualities or characteristics that people will often, this happened to me because I was a girl, because I was feminine, because I was cuddly. This happened to me because I enjoyed the attention, or I had a physical response. This is one of the things that's most confusing about sexual trauma, is that it can be, you can have a sense of pleasure or arousal or orgasm. And so all of that creates this, spaghetti mess of like, well, therefore, how can it not be my fault if all of those things? So when I started to unpack that for myself, and of course, this is then what I do, and everything I do in Beyond Surviving is just basically saying, this is what I did. Here's how we're going to do it. Here are the steps. Let's go.
Yes.
I started from the place of looking at the errors that I was making. I approached it very logically. Am I making an error in assigning causation? And how do we determine causation?
All right, hold on. Let me pause you again. I'm going to write that down so you can pick up where you left off. Causation.
Mm,
Because you said something earlier that was gold, right? So you said you had to step up and look at the incident.
yeah.
Saying that's one of the things that I'm finding when I'm working with people. And again, as human beings, we are naturally trained. It's in our DNA to avoid pain. It's
Mhm.
in there. So a lot of people struggle with going back to the incident. Like again, when I was working with the woman who watched her childhood love kill himself, and having her revisit that moment, it was very emotional for her.
Right.
Very emotional. It's like we got through it, but it took time. It took a lot of empathy, and for her, it took a lot of courage.
Mhm.
So what can you say like directly to someone that's been, and it doesn't just have to be sexual assault or sexual abuse,
No, yeah.
just any type of trauma, about stepping up and looking at the incident?
Well, the first thing that I say to all my clients in session number 1 is that we cannot heal what we will not name.
Yes, I love that.
Mm. And so we want to look at the ways that we've been minimizing or dismissing an experience, and that could be because of our own behavior, and oftentimes other people will be minimizing or dismissing. Get over that already. It was so long ago. Yada
Mm.
yada yada. Can be that big of a deal, right? So there's this little moment of saying, like, essentially the energetics of it, the psychology of it is, it's like this elephant, and if I just push it over here into the corner, and like, it's no big deal, it's no big deal, it's no big deal, it's no big deal, and I'm over here, I'm going to live my life, right? I'm going to live my best life. But this elephant is there, and it is taking up space energetically. And so when we say, all right, I'm no longer going to do that, two mindsets that are really helpful to get you to kind of turn and look and say, okay, elephant, I see you,
Mm.
is one, support. Don't do it alone.
True.
Like, just don't do it alone. Like, it doesn't even have to be more complicated than that. Find a mentor, find a guide, find a resource, find a friend, right? Because we can't do that by ourselves. And the other thing is to remember and to remind yourself and give yourself permission that you don't have to deal with the whole elephant all at once,
Yes.
right? It's like, I can take this in little bits and work with it. And that's actually one of the reasons, I mean, also because I have a background in education and my mind just works in terms of curriculum, but that is one of the reasons why the Beyond Surviving program is a step-by-step process. It's different from therapy in that sense, right? It's well, here's our lesson, here's our topic, here's what we're working on, because I only want you looking at this one little, yeah, we're going to get to the other pieces. I promise we're going to get to those, other things, but let's just right here for right now. And let's get that, settle that in, and then let's add in a little bit more.
Yes.
And so that's really, my focus is, how do we maximize healing and minimize re-traumatization by taking things in a very particular order and at a very particular pace.
So do you agree with this statement? And again, I've done probably 50 episodes on grief, at least 50, possibly more than that. That you don't that you don't get rid of depression. You manage it. It's one of those things. So a lot of people hit depressive states because of what happened to them. And just a quick example, like my father passed in 2019, and like we had to end care, like we watched him die.
You see.
And so like we fast forward just about 2 years, and one of my gym clients, we were away at a race, and her father was sick, and she got the phone call that it might
Mm,
be any time now, and I was in a good place, but then when I heard she got that phone call, it just triggered something in me, because then I
mhm.
remembered my sister calling me saying Dad's not going to survive the day,
Yeah.
and it's like, and I didn't want to interfere with her mindset, so I just went out to the front of the Airbnb, and I had my moment. It's like I thought I was past that,
Mm,
and that
mm.
one, like, because I've done multiple episodes on just losing parents or just losing loved ones in general,
Yeah.
and I could get up here and I could tell the story about them, but just hearing that phone ring and just seeing the look of horror on her face just brought me
Mm,
right back to that
mm,
day.
mhm.
So again, what are your thoughts on that? Like
Right.
the act of what happened will never leave your brain, but it's how you move on from it, where the
Yeah,
healing comes from.
for sure, for sure. I mean, beyond surviving as a concept really came about as from a moment of me talking with someone and them reflecting back to me, "You're such a survivor. You've gotten through so much. You never gave up," these sorts of things. And I got really angry at this person. I didn't know I was gonna get angry, but I was angry, and I said, that's what? Like, who wants to just, like, survive their life?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do that. And so, like, there has to be something beyond it. And as this work has grown and evolved over the last 15 years, my philosophy is that trauma is not a life sentence and that we are not meant to be in a constant state of recovery. That
Yes.
doesn't mean that we aren't going to feel things.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So there's a distinction between being in recovery where so much of your time and your attention and your mental energy and even your physicalness is kind of wrapped up with something that is historical. It's from the past, it's of the past. And the goal in Beyond Surviving is really about how do we integrate an experience, a wounding, a moment like sexual trauma in such a way that we hold it as a part of our narrative, a part of our story, but it is not the story.
Yes.
And we then are able to move forward in our lives. And when things come up, because things can pop up, the brain is so layered, so faceted. And oftentimes, what will ping something or cause us to, remember a trauma or a moment can be very on the nose, such as this person's going through, about to lose their father. I went through that myself. But it can also be very random, like a smell or a sound
Mhm.
or, a texture. And so being how you respond in those moments and being equipped to be able to self-resource and support yourself without going into catastrophizing. Oh, see, nothing's ever changed. I'm still so broken. Like, no, you're human and you're just having a human
Yes.
response and a human experience to something that is sad and hard or painful.
Yep.
And now walk through that without it, derailing you. That's the
Exactly.
idea.
Yeah, and it's important to feel what you feel.
Yeah.
Like there are days, I keep a picture of my dad right here in my
Aw.
office from back when he was in the Marines. And then there are some days where I'm just totally at peace with what happened,
Mm,
because he totally would have sucked as an old man. Because
mm,
he was just very independent, very busy. He was an engineer. He loved to build things, and he
mhm.
and he always said, "When I can't build anymore, that's when I'm gonna be done."
Yeah.
And he was 79. He got sick with stage 4 heart failure. He had to call my
Mm,
daughter and I down to install a TV for him and stuff. And I could tell it, like, he was just losing his manhood. Like, he was just a manly man, you
mm.
know.
Yeah.
And I could just tell. So it's like he went when he should have gone. Because if he would have lived to be like 90 something on an oxygen tank and all this stuff, like, he would have been absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
So like when I have those moments, I think back to that,
Right.
to where it's
Yeah.
like, he had a good ending. He died right before 2020, where
Mhm,
everything shut down.
mhm.
We were all able to see him, say goodbye. So it's like I
Beautiful.
don't focus on the fact that he's not here anymore. you know.
Well, that's really an important piece of the puzzle. You're making me think of a couple of things. One is someone asked Keanu Reeves once, "What happens when we die?" And his response was the best response I've ever heard. The people who love us will miss us.
Mm,
And so I think that's exactly what you're describing, right? There are
yes.
days that that missing is always sitting there, and it's
Yep.
just it's kind of like an accordion. It kind of expands or it contracts. And there are
Yes.
moments where it gets really big and it feels really present. And so in those moments, you soothe yourself by thinking about what you comforting yourself by thinking about, all the things that you just named. And the word that you use there is focus. And that's something that I work on quite intentionally with my clients because focus really is power. The
Yes.
brain, we're constantly teaching the brain what to pay attention to, what to prove, and we go out and we gather the evidence. And so, when we become locked in grief or when we become locked in trauma, what's really happened is that we become hyper focused, right, on this one incident or incidents, like as a constellation. Abuse, trauma is often more than one thing. And we stop looking around. Right? We stop taking in. I have a client who we're working with this in some ways right now is, very much focused in on the ways in which her parents didn't protect her, didn't care for her, weren't there for her. And we need to do the work of naming it, acknowledging it, as we've been talking about. We need to
Yeah.
try to get perspective on it. But right now, there's such tunnel vision that she's missing out on all the love that's actually around her right now,
Yes.
right? And so we do that with trauma. We start to think nobody's ever going to love me, and we only think about the people who have rejected us and ignore all the people who have cared for
It's
us,
so
right?
true. So
Nobody's ever
true.
there to support me, and right, we only think
Mhm.
about the times when people have let us down, and we forget all the times when somebody has shown up for us,
Yes.
right? I'm completely like unlovable, and we ignore all of the wonderful, beautiful reasons why we are lovable. And so, yeah, I love that I get to sit with people in this struggle, right? It really is an unlearning. We are taught things, physically, biologically, nervous system wise, neurologically, and then, psychologically with belief systems as a result of trauma. It's like all these layers that get put upon us.
Yes.
And that, healing is really about strip that layer, take that off, pull that away, like what? And then we get to show up as ourselves. And I would say in my own personal experience, like that's been part of the magic of my own healing is that it wasn't that I had to go and reinvent myself. Like the authentic self, my true nature, my true self was kind of just sitting there waiting for me,
Yes.
to face the things that were hard, to reframe, to reject, and to really reclaim who I
Yes.
am, what I want, what I'm all about, my mind, my body, my spirit, so that I can go out into the world and create the life that I really love.
Love it. It's like you see it says up above us, your true power lies in your story. Like, and you've said it a couple of times, and I said it earlier too. Like, it's not what happens. It's about how you speak about what happens
Very much
or
so.
what happened. And it can really be anything. Like again, this whole show, the premise of this show started because in 2009 I suffered a really bad knee injury during an athletic event, and the doctors told me I'd never run or jump again. Now I had just gotten into fitness officially, and as I said earlier, I have 5 kids, so they were all small then, and I think my twin boys, when the injury happened, were only 4 months. And I'm thinking I'll never run or jump again. Like I'll never play basketball with my kids. I'll never do that. And they just started getting into this negative headspace. But then I was like, whoa. I was like,
Right.
I'm like, they don't get to decide how
Consequences.
I'm gonna heal. They
Mm-hmm.
don't get. I said your job is to put my knee back together. I
Yeah,
said I'll
that's
take
right.
it from there.
I love that, Robert.
You know, and then it's
Yeah, that's
like no, no, it's
powerful.
like you're not going to decide what space I live in. And so when
Yeah.
I'm working with people that have gone through stuff, and again, like I've told, I'll tell this quickly, then we'll bring it down. Is I told one of my clients, so he lost his son when his son was only 9.
Oh.
And it's like, that's parents' worst nightmare. And something, knock on wood, I hope I never have to deal with.
Mhm.
Right. And so I was teaching a class, and he was up against the wall during the class, and I could tell he was emotional. And so I go over, I put my hand on his shoulder, and I was like, "What's going on, man?" And he's like, "I just miss him. I just miss him so much."
Yeah.
And I said, "Do you believe he can see you?" And so he looks up at me. He's like, "Yeah." He's like, I want to believe that." I said, "Do you think he likes what he sees right now?" Like
Mm.
I said, "Do you think he wants to see his dad up on the wall, not engaged with the rest of the class?" I said, "Does he want to see his dad being an MF and beast?"
Mm.
you know. And so he kind of perked up a little. He's like, "You're right." I said, "Damn right." I said he can watch you right and show him what his dad is capable of. But like,
Mm.
he's like, "Now let's get off this wall and get back on the path."
Mm. Mm.
Then at the end of the class, he was like, "Thank you." So he's like, "That's exactly what I needed
Yeah.
to hear."
He needed that little shift of energy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the space in which we create opportunity to feel our feelings, and I think healing from trauma is very much a process of grieving in many ways. There are what we call desired alternative outcomes. We wish it hadn't happened. I wish somebody had jumped in and helped me. I
Yes.
wish I had run away. Like all of these things.
Yeah.
And when we begin to accept that those things are not going to happen, that what happened happened,
Yes.
and we then feel grief, and allowing ourselves to feel that, but also allowing ourselves to embrace life as it is now and create our own sense of empowerment and presence and resilience, and just reclaim our right to live our life. Because you know I often say, like, every client is a little bit of an FU to my grandfather. You know? And
I
and
love it.
certainly I live through that lens too. Not that there's like not that it's an anger place, but just a little bit like, "You meant this for ill,
Mm.
but guess what?"
I'm
You
still
know?
here.
I'm still here, and I'm doing
Yes.
my thing, and I'm bringing other people along on the journey with me. And through that, as we tell our stories. One of my dear colleagues, Donna Jensen, she has a website called Time to Tell, and she does writing workshops with survivors. And one of her famous sayings is, "Telling is healing." And that's it. So I love that you create this space for people to tell their stories, to not be ashamed, to bring their truth to the table. Because when we find safe spaces to do that, and we're really witnessed and we're really seen, yeah, I think that just opens up every single possibility that we have for living a good life.
Yeah, and before I give you the final words, and it's equally disturbing for both men and women, because for men, we think vulnerability is being weak.
Mm,
And I've done a couple of episodes, and I've done a couple solo videos on how vulnerability, it's the ultimate strength. And even for me growing up, my dad loved him to death, miss him to death, but he was a Marine.
yeah.
And it's like it was
Right.
just like, you do what I say because
Tighten it up.
I said it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like
Mhm,
there wasn't a
mhm,
whole lot of empathy coming out of him, and I
mm.
kind of got that. Like I kind of have that kind of tough. No, I mean the name of the show is "Shut Up and Grind." It's like I kind of adopted, right? I kind of adopted that mentality myself.
Yes.
It's like
Mhm.
we're living in a different climate now. So like with my kids, that
Yeah,
just doesn't work. Like the world is different now. So it's like
yeah.
understanding that. It's like, yeah, I'm not gonna just up and change overnight, but at least I'm more aware that
Right.
with
That's
other
it.
people, like I gotta tread a little lightly. Like shut up and grind doesn't work for everyone.
Mhm.
so
Yeah. Yes, I often describe myself as compassionately challenging. Like, I'll kick your butt, but with a smile. Right. And I
Yeah.
think, in the space that a mentor has to have that a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're just, constantly, if you don't push people and move them out of their comfort zone,
Yes.
right, they're going to just continue with the status quo.
Exactly.
But finding the balance between, shut up and do it, and and I'm gonna, give you a little bit of grace when it's feeling hard, right?
Yes.
And to love you through that and nurture you through that moment. Yeah, it's
Yes.
powerful.
So true. So true. All right. So let people know where they can find you. What do you got going on? If you have any programs to
Fantastic.
offer.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
No
Yeah,
problem.
you can certainly learn more about me at rachelgrantcoaching.com. On the website, you will find a few things that I'd love to highlight. One, if you scroll to the bottom, you can get my 3 stages of recovery checklist. This is a great place to start because it's going to kind of break down for you the stages of healing, what the goals are for each of those stages, and the best kind of support to get based on which stage you're in. It's laid out very linearly, but that doesn't mean that that's actually what happens. You can be in more than one stage at once, but it just gives you a nice little framework to kind of assess yourself. And so definitely pick that up. You can learn more about the Beyond Surviving program. And if you think that that would be a good next step for you, then you can fill out an application for a Discover Your Genuine Self session, and we'll have a conversation. We'll get to know each other and see if it is a good fit. And if not, then I'll direct you towards some of my other resources, like my 28-day program, my monthly support group, my free resources like my Facebook, my podcast, right? So you can kind of access all that too. So if you just want to kind of dip your toe in the water and kind of check me out and feel me out a little bit, check out the blog, check out the podcast. And then if you want to take a step to get in touch, I'm here. I am so happy to be a resource and support however I can be.
Love it. Rachel, this has been great. So
Robert, thanks for
glad.
making it happen. Thanks for being with me. I so enjoyed our conversation.
Good. Thank you. I did as well. And we'll definitely have you back on. It's like I do panels. I'm actually slacking on these. But like I bring back some of my former guests and we pick a topic and we just go round table about the topic. I'm definitely overdue for one. But I started managing in Anytime Fitness now. So it's like my days have gotten way longer. so I've been slacking on the panels. And like I said earlier, I'm away this weekend. So I'm hoping maybe in probably 3 weeks, we'll get another panel going. But yeah, I'd love to invite you to be on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely will. All right. So this was great. I'm pretty sure I have all of your contact info in the description. So on all of the podcast sites, and you can download this probably, I'm going to upload it right now. So maybe give it about 10 minutes or so. You can get it on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts and distribute it out.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. Take care. Happy travels.
Happy travels. See ya. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Shut Up and Grind. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. Robert has over 20 years experience pouring his knowledge and expertise at many events in the service and fitness industry, as well as secondary schools and universities. He has a true passion for helping others break through the barriers that are holding them back. To book Robert B. Foster to speak or to reach out, go to robertbfoster.com. Till next time, shut up and grind.